Welcome to another class of immunology that is called B cell generation, activation, and maturation or differentiation, whatever. Now, this B cell, they are the basic level of soldiers. We already know this. They are the basic soldiers. They are the soldiers who fight at the battlefield or ground zero. So they are much more, much more flexible. They should be much more flexible. They are the sole responsible cells who are directly interacting with the antigen, identifying their epitopes. So they need much more flexibility. They need much more flexibility. Now these B cells, they are basically where they develop. They actually develop in the hematopoietic system in the bone marrow, and this is the very important visualizing concept, and you must learn this. There are two phases of training for B cell. One is called antigen independent phase, where they must learn about the theoretical portions, all theoretical portions, past history and past battles, story of battles, these weapon, that weapon, these that, those army soldiers, rank, everything. But they all are antigen independent phases. So now this is the antigen independent phases where the progenitor cells, they start changing its DNA. So there is an immunoglobulin gene rearrangement, as you can see here. Now they are mature B cell. Mature means what? Mature B cell to be accepted by the secondary lymphoid organs, right? So now they released from the bone marrow. See the amount, 5 into 10 to the power 6 per day. This amount of soldiers are getting graduations from the bone marrow, that is primary lymphoid organ. They are committed soldiers. Now once they started their journey through the blood, and when they reach to the borders, that is disturbing regions, secondary lymphoid organs, whenever they enter, this is a lymph, basically lymphoid organ, peripheral lymphoid organ. This phase is called antigen dependent phase. So now they have to face the real time enemies. Now they have to fight, they have to identify, they need to make strategies, they need to use weapon, they need to use those class switching concepts. So whatever they have learned, in the bone marrow, they need to use it here, and they have to use their own brain, they have to use their own decision strategy to fight with these enemies. Now whenever they reach some of the molecules, some means only 10% of the soldiers, 100% if entered, only 10% of them are able to interact with the antigen. So they are selected, and rest of the who doesn't care antigen or what, they are going for death. So 90% of the cells are dying, they are dead after this selection process. So rest of the 10% is much better than the T cell. In case of T cell, you have learned that T cell is 1% almost. So in case of this, they interacted with the antigen, they interacted with the Th cell. Here you can see Th cell. So they are now become activated. Now activated B cells, as we have learned about the VDJ recombination, I think we understand the term or meaning of the activated B cells. And now there is an affinity maturation, what is required, what is demanding at that particular time. Now there is a required class switching, and plasma cell, they are produced, secreted immunoglobulin released in the system, and memory cell, they remain, they are floating in the system. So this is basically the B cell generation. Now rearrangement of the B cell receptors have already been explained to you in different class. But as a cellular life, they don't need to go through those like T cell, those positive selection, negative selection, and their selection is much more tougher. But in this case, B cell, they don't need to go through this huge very tough selection, because they are at the ground level soldiers. They don't need that, they just need to fight. But decision making step is T cell. T cells are the decision making steps. So they are the officer ranks, commanding officer or more hierarchy officers. So their selection is much more strict, because they are the decision making cells. They can amplify, they can completely change the direction of the immune response. That is why their selection is much more tougher compared to the B cell. Here, whatever I have said, I have explained this. I have explained this diagram here is basically written in this section. So I am not going to read these things. I am not going to explain it. Just see this diagram. These diagrams are self-explanatory. Now these are the bone marrow stromal cells. We know in case of hematopoietic system, they provide the heme, that is the hematopoietic inducing medium. So these are the bone marrow stromal cells who always bind with the pro B cell, that is the immature B cells, and they help these B cells to mature enough, and this is basically the final portion of the B cells which are present in the bone marrow. Now they release and then they reach to the lymph or any peripheral lymphoid organ. So you have to practice these things. Now this chart is very important, that is lymphoid stem cell is the beginning. Here you can see there is a gene rearrangement, pro B cell, then pre B cell, then immature B cell. Don't confuse it. Immature B cell means they release bone marrow, they after crossing the bone marrow, they reach to the peripheral lymphoid organ where they are known as the same cell, they are known as naive cells. So naive cells and the immature B cells, they are same. Immature is the last cell of the last phase of that B cell maturation in the bone marrow, and that cell, when it enters into the peripheral lymphoid organ, they are called naive cells. And then there is a matured cells. So this is periphery antigen dependent, this is bone marrow antigen independent. So this diagram is very important. You don't need to remember all of these points at this level, but you need to memorize this thing, this diagram, because this, this name of these cells are very confusing, but if you go through it couple of times you can understand, but these are not very tough as you think. So these steps, after what rearrangement the name of the cell is changing. So you have to learn this thing, and from what phase to what phase they are happening in the bone marrow, from what to what is happening inside the peripheral lymph system. So these things are important to learn. There are some, these are receptor rearrangement diagrams. So if you go through it, this is the concept of the surrogate light chain. They are only the supporting system of the heavy chain, and finally they are replaced by the light chain once light chains are produced. So first heavy chain is produced and then light chain is produced. So these are the concept. Now if I explain you the concept of the conversion of the B cells conversion in terms of the cell cycle, here you can see this is the G0, right? So they are they are in dormant, but still they all are active because they are waiting for the signal. So now here is the antigen, they have bind with the antigen, they engulf it, they process it, so they have started, they got the commitment. So now they display it. Once they display it and it is been recognized by the TH cell, then TH cell, they secrete cytokines, and this cytokine, once it is reached to the B cell, they give the signal to the B cell, okay, start production. It means commitment of the cell cycle. Now you can see the cytokine is released by the T cell, and it is reached here, right? It reached to the target nucleus. So now they they push the nucleus to take decision. Now once this is taken place, they got the commitment. This is the commitment phase, and then there is a replication, and then there is a mitosis, and these are proliferating B cells as you expect. So this is basically the cycle of the B cells, and humoral response started. Now this is completely contact dependent, because if there is no contact, your B cell cannot get cannot start any division. So this is another important thing what I want to mention, humoral response. Though we know this humoral response, we know the detail of the primary response, secondary response in the first unit class. So I don't need to explain it here again. But what I must mention, that is this comparison. This comparison of primary and secondary response in terms of responding B cells, lag period, time of peak response, magnitude, isotype produced, antigen, antibody affinity. This is very important chart to understand the humoral response of the B cell. And uh, almost this is almost the entire part, and you don't need to know more of this chapter is also you need the elementary idea. Most of the things you don't need, and these are something which is important, that is the naive B cell and the memory B cell. Naive B cell and the memory B cell, both are the cells. Naive B cells are the cells that started their journey in the peripheral lymphoid organ, and memory cells, they also the production of the, the final production of the cells, they remain in the system. So these are the properties on the basis of what you have to compare these two cells. So these differences are very important. So this is all about this class. This is all about this part, basically B cell maturation, generation, and the humoral response which are associated with the B cell.